A quick note before we get into the episode. Oversharing is a podcast for entertainment purposes only. It is not a medical podcast and does not constitute medical or psychological advice. Always seek the advice of your physician or mental health professional. Let's do some intentions. Okay. Hi, I'm a 31-year-old female listener and a chronic oversharer, which is why I'm willing to say I also suffer from chronic yeast infections. I used to get maybe one or two a year and they'd clear up, but after hooking up with someone 2 years ago, I've been dealing with infections that don't seem to resolve or come back just when you think you've beat them. I have tried so many things to deal with this issue. OBGYN visits, urgent care, Planned Parenthood, pills. I've always been almost overly cautious about STIs and have done all the panels many times. I've gone to an infectious disease specialist and a functional medicine practice that costs over $4,000 out of pocket between testing, visits, and supplements. I paid for subscription testing of my microbiome and bought zinc-lined underwear. I've tried 6 different types of suppositories, including monostat, multiple vaginal probiotics, and boric acid, which would be poison if ingested. When symptoms come up, I feel like I will never be normal again and won't be able to date or have a normal sex life because of all of this will interfere. I don't feel confident and I feel pressure to know for sure if I'm good before going on a date, but there's no at-home definitive test for yeast infections. I can't even tell what normal is half the time anymore. I'm constantly evaluating, Googling, and reading Reddit rabbit holes for a real answer. While dating is the biggest hurdle, the energy and frustration takes a toll in other areas. As I job hunt, I'm also getting worried about cost, insurance, etc. As I scroll past ad after ad on Instagram for products claiming to cure me, I feel like I need an intention to break this cycle. How can I continue to care for my health and seek a satisfactory treatment without letting it consume me or hold me back in other areas of my life? Signed, the Yeasty Boys.
I am really glad that she wrote in. I have a lot of patients that deal with whether it's yeast infections or chronic UTIs or dyspareunia, which is like painful sex, or like tightening of the vaginal muscles that makes sex painful. It's really, really hard and it's really lonely because people don't talk about it. So I'm really glad that she wrote in because it can be so all-consuming, especially if you're single and dating and dealing with these issues.
Right. And it's not something that's like so obvious to anyone else. So it's probably hard to get into unless you know someone really well, but it affects your work or it affects everything. It's just I'm sure there's like some layer of shame there.
Right. It's almost like if you have, kind of like Crohn's disease or gluten allergy or something, it's like that also will affect you chronically every day, but it's just much easier. It's just much easier to talk about it, instead of, kind of sitting at the dinner table and being like, oh yeah, I can't drink because I'm on antibiotics because I have a yeast infection, and everyone's
right.
like, TMI.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So you kind of have to hide it. And the other thing about all of those types of conditions, especially like painful sex or yeast infections, is, and I know this is annoying to say, but like worrying about it and the stressing about it tends to make it worse because the stressing affects your immune system, which then might make it even harder to have kind of like healthy immune system to fight off some of these infections.
Right.
Or in the case of painful sex, it's like bracing yourself for the sex and like worrying about whether or not it's going to hurt, then makes you anxious and tight. And then it makes the sex even more painful. So this is really hard.
It's so hard. And I feel like it can be applied to so many other things where it's like the stress, even like dating or anything like that, where like the stress of it kind of you feel like makes the outcome worse or becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But to say that to people also kind of feels like, well, what am I supposed to do?
Right.
Right. Now I'm stressed about being stressed.
Yes.
And like, how do I, you know what I mean? Like there's still even if I'm not stressed, it's still a problem. So how do you hold both of those things? And I think that's kind of what she's asking for, is like, how do I kind of continue to work on this medical issue while not constantly thinking about it?
100%. And I'm sure you experience that with like fertility stuff too, where people are like, well, if you're, don't be worrying about it or thinking about it or stressed out, or that's going to make it harder to get pregnant. It's like, thank you for
Right.
that.
Okay. No longer stressed. Appreciate
Right.
it. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And because then there is this kind of layer of like guilt about like, well, I can't control being stressed and now I'm guilty about being stressed, which is so, yeah, the whole thing. I mean, a few things that might just mindset shifts that might be helpful. And I think this is helpful for a lot of things that we're chronically worried about, which is like, and it sounds like she's done so much. So I'm glad that she put in there, like she's tried so many things and paid all this money. And so I don't think it's about, oh, try this thing that you haven't tried yet. But at the same time, I do think at any given time, you kind of have to like pick a path and trust that path, even if it's just for a period of time. So, like, pick your route, whatever. If you're going to buy one of these new things, just buy it, put your faith in it. And then when that like mind chatter comes up of like the what if and what if this and what if it doesn't work and maybe I should try that, you could be like, okay, shh. Like I picked my path. I'm trusting my path and I'm not going to reevaluate this until this given time frame that I've given to try this thing is over. Because I think it's just the doubting and the second guessing. And sometimes if you can just pick a route and just trust that route, it can quiet your mind at least while you're in it. Like even with, I've spoken to patients about like sleep training with babies, right? And they're kind of like,
Okay.
you know, a similar kind of technique, which is like, I don't know which thing to do. And this one says this, and should I let them cry or should I, you know, do this method, or I don't know which one is the right thing. And usually what we come up with at the end is like, pick a book or a person or like a whoever, like a guru, a sleep guru, and just do what they say. Like just pick a path, read the book, do the book, and while you're doing that book, trust in that. Like you almost like have to pick something that you can have some faith in and like go with it, and not even because that's the best way to do it, but just because it helps you to kind of have something to come back to quiet your mind in the meantime.
Right. And I think even if you make that time bound, it makes it so like even because it's hard to trust anything 100%.
Right.
And I remember doing this to like fertility doctors where I'd be like, all right. And
Yes.
I remember talking about this with my older therapist, which was like, all right, give it 6 months with this person, see how it's go. Like at 6 months, you can then start evaluating
Right.
again. But go all in with this one.
Yes.
I used to make like appointments and then cancel them. And then like,
Right.
go down the rabbit holes and then um everything says something different. So it's like
Right.
and he gave me that very same advice, but he was like, but I also had a fear that I was going very far down the wrong path. So he
Mm-hmm.
was like, just make it time bound,
Yes.
but stick to it for a certain period of time. So I think that's great advice.
Yeah. And then like the benefit is if you, it's almost the same thing in like a smaller, more minutia way of like spirituality or like religion or something where you're like, I'm going to trust in this thing so that I can just quiet my mind and this tendency to want to over control every decision along the way. So it's kind of like if you're going out on that date and you're like, I don't know, is this working? Is it not? Is it, you're just like, I'm trusting the thing. I took the medicine. I did the suppository. I'm doing the best I can. I'm going to just go on this date. And, you know, if I feel good and I want to have intimacy, I'm going to do it. If I start to feel uncomfortable and I don't, I'm not, as long as that's in the protocol that you've picked, right? Like if you go to a doctor for this and they're like, hey, I would abstain from sex for a certain amount period of time. You don't want to introduce new then do whatever that doctor says. But I think the idea of like having a North Star that you can follow so that way you take the pressure off of yourself and your own mind. And then you can maybe like find those spaces between flare ups. Because it doesn't sound like you have a yeast infection every single day of your life. But on the days when you don't have them, you're afraid of them coming back, or you're wondering if one is brewing, or you're not sure how sex is going to affect it. So I think just having a path can help you be a little bit calmer in the meantime of like, I'm doing the best that I can. And then maybe in calming down, you can kind of boost your immune function because you're not so stressed all the time. And you can have kind of the opposite, of that negative spiral. You can have a positive spiral where you're calmer, your body's immune system can build back up. And okay, at the end of 6 months or 3 months or whatever you decide, if this isn't working, I'll take a new path. But I think it's the bouncing around and feeling like you have too much control is what
Right.
makes us a little crazy.
That's great advice.
So the intention that I wrote for her is, I will choose and trust a path to release my mind and rest in the space between. So pick your path, trust your path, release your mind control, and see if you can find rest in the space between the flare ups, because it does sound like there is space between the flare ups, but in that space, she's filling it with what ifs and checking and over checking. And so I do think it's important that when you are in between infections, that you kind of rest, say, okay, this right now it's working. Right now I'm okay. And you're okay until you know for sure that you're not okay. Because I get that idea of like, I don't even know what normal is anymore.
right.
Like, I think that's like, is that an itch, or is that a normal itch, or is that an irritation, or is it in my head? It's almost like the tick thing. Like when you hear that there's ticks, you're just like, is that a tick? Am I itching? What's itching? What's that? Like,
Yeah.
you
And
can't
it takes over your
rest.
whole life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah. It's a great point.
yeah, I really feel for you. I'm glad you wrote in. Thank you for having the courage to write in about something so personal that I am sure that hundreds of women can relate to this, whether it's UTIs or yeast infections or, any, kind of
Chronic issue, medical issue. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, let
Um,
us know how it goes. And I'm sure this advice, there's part of it where you're like, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to rest in the space between. But like, if you're not itching, you're not itching. If you're like comfortable, just like, enjoy being comfortable and just catch your mind when it goes to that place of the what if it comes back, and bring it back to right now. I feel comfortable. I'm sure there are moments where you feel comfortable. So
right.
try to enjoy
Yeah.
those.
Totally. Don't always believe what your mind is telling you. I think you
Yes.
said that in the beginning of when we started doing this podcast, and I think it's very helpful. It's like,
Yeah.
just because your mind is saying there's something wrong, or what's that weird smell or something that could be in
Right.
your, like, it doesn't mean that it's true.
Yes. Yeah.
All
All
right.
right. Yeah. Thanks for that.
Thank you. Let's do some triggers. You want to read our first one?
Sure. I will read this. Okay. Hi, Jordana and Dr. Naomi. Listener since day one, I recently had a triggered scenario that I'd love to have your opinion on. Background. I've been struggling with infertility for over 4 years, and it took several procedures, a few medicated cycles, 3 IUIs, and 2 IVF transfers before we successfully had my son in January 2024. Because we struggled so much, we started trying for a second in September 2024 and have since had a chemical pregnancy from our last embryo from our first round of IVF. And we did a second retrieval in March 2025 that was a disaster and ended with only 2 embryos that failed to implant when transferred. I was a mess after the failed transfers and took the summer off fertility to regroup. Now for the triggered. I've been pretty open about what we've been going through, and a lot of my friends know this has been a hard period in our life. As we were prepping for our most recent transfer, we met up with friends of ours who also have one son and were trying for another. For context, she got pregnant the first try for her son, and in her attempt for a second, she got pregnant again on the first try, which unfortunately ended in a miscarriage. So on our walk, she started asking about some of the details of IVF and then started explaining how she's tried for 2 months. And since she hasn't gotten pregnant, she knows she's infertile, and started making comments about how we're in the same boat and how much infertility sucks. I lost my mind. Hearing about how 2 months not getting a positive was the same as years of invasive treatments that all but once have ended negatively pushed me over the edge. I then started explaining how it's not the same and how I wouldn't wish infertility on anyone and the time commitment it entails. And then she said, "Oh, yeah, if that's the case, I don't think I'd do it then. That sounds like too much work." I took a break from the friendship over the summer, but she's been frantically trying to meet up the last few weeks. And today I got the confirmation it was to share she's pregnant, which happened the same month of this interaction. So, how triggered can I be? I know infertility takes many forms, but hearing a very fertile person making comments about how we're the same really got to me. Thanks for all you do, an infertile bitch.
Okay. I can understand why she'd be triggered, but I also I understand the mindset that she's in. I think there can be this like sort of competition of who's had it the worst in this
Mm-hmm.
scenario. And, someone once said that to me because I remember thinking, like, if I had a miscarriage, I'm like, at least it was in the first trimester, or at least it was like not like this. And you hear about all these people who have these things that are like worse and worse and worse. I think it was our sister Becky who said this to me, which was like, if it's a competition, then only one person gets to suffer. Like only
Right.
like the person who has the worst person who's got it the worst in the world is the only person who's allowed to suffer.
Right.
And I think that's actually like a good perspective because it's like just because someone is having a situation that's not as bad as yours or worse than yours, it doesn't mean that someone's individual suffering
Right.
is not valid
Right.
or is not going through some of the same things that went on in your head.
Right. What she probably was feeling in the moment, I don't know how much this friend knows about all of the details of what she's been through, is maybe just like a little bit misunderstood, or like this other friend wasn't aware of what she was going through. So it just made her feel like unseen, perhaps, when she was saying like how terrible she feels about 2 months of trying and not getting pregnant. Maybe felt sort of like, I need to tell you what I've been through, which it sounds like this friend didn't know, because her reaction after she heard it was like, whoa, that sounds like a lot. Like, I'm probably not going to even
Do that. Right.
go there, which also maybe felt slightly offensive, of like, it's crazy that you're doing all of that. Might have been a little salt on the wound at the end of the conversation.
Right. Well, it's tough because it's like the friend was probably just yelled at for not like understanding the extent to which it went through. And then when the friend's like, wow, that's a lot, she's also kind of
Right.
you know what I mean? Like if she was like, oh, that sounds like a breeze, I could do that, no problem. Like
Right.
I think
You
like
can't win.
is
Right.
there a right answer for that? And I understand everything kind of feels like I mean, I said that at the beginning of this episode, I feel like everything feels really triggering in a lot of different ways because like there's just like a lot of pain there and there's a lot of frustration and there's a lot of like jealousy in this process
Right.
because you see, everyone's results are so pregnancy is one of the things where it's like your results are very visible.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
it's not like if you do well, if you got a promotion at work, you're constantly seeing the promotion at work at your
Yes.
friends. If you lose your job and your friend gets a promotion, it's not like you see it every day on their body sticking out of them, or you see the
Totally.
physical manifestation of what's happening, or there's 16 parties to celebrate their promotion.
Yes.
It is like uniquely difficult in that way, where you're getting a lot of constant reminders. But I think it's triggering, but I don't think it's necessarily this friend's fault. And I do think she was trying to relate to you, being like, and that's probably why she was telling you about this, because
Right.
she's like, you understand what it's like to be trying for something and it's not going well. And like, I don't think because she hasn't been trying for 4 years or because she only had one miscarriage, that means she can't relate to you at all.
Right. Yep. And it, like you said before, I agree that her, getting pregnant the first time and then trying for 2 months, those 2 months, that was her experience in those 2 months, that she probably started to get a little nervous or freaked out or anxious or whatever. And maybe because she does really empathize with the struggle of you and other people that are going through this, it made her like kind of overreact, I guess, in your mind, to 2 months of trying. But that's her genuine experience with it, is that she, felt anxious and started to think, well, what if I need to go down this road of IVF? The what if, the you know, future tripping, and wanted to come to you with advice on it, but obviously
Right.
didn't get the comfort in sharing that she was hoping for. And again, this is why we have this triggered segment. And most of the time, nothing's triggering unless there's a wound there that's being touched in some way. And most of our listeners know that. So you obviously have a wound. She touched it. Do I think in a perfect world she could have been a little bit more sensitive? Yeah, but maybe she didn't know. It sounds like if you told her the whole thing, she didn't know it already,
Right.
perhaps.
Or maybe she could have said, I know it's not much compared to what you've been through, like an acknowledge, but here's how I feel.
Yeah.
Like I think maybe like an acknowledgement of the differences in the experience while sharing her own, because you don't want to make people feel like they can't
Yes.
share with you unless something absolutely like that you deem horrific enough. Like I would ask yourself, like, what would she have had to have gone through in order for you to
Right.
feel
How many
like you're in
months
this right? How
would
many
you?
months, how many miscarriages, how many fertility treatments? Like what is your bar for like we are in the same boat?
Yes. And I do
Um
think it's good for people to be mindful when you're going through something, whatever it is, whether you're single or you've gone through a divorce or you're struggling with fertility or whatever your wound is. I think it's good for people to be mindful of how is this going to affect my ability to be there for other people? Otherwise, it becomes really lonely. If nobody can talk to you about what they're going through because it's not as bad as you, like only the number one sufferer gets to suffer, it's going to really be a block to the emotional intimacy that you have in your relationships if she can't talk to you because it's not as bad as what you've gone through. So maybe it was in the phrasing. I could see that. I don't totally dismiss this at all. She probably could have phrased it differently. But if she's feeling anxious after 2 months of trying, I think if you're her good friend, she should be able to tell you that.
I agree. I would give this a 4 because I understand the the feeling of like everything is triggering, but I don't think it's this friend was really I think she was trying to relate to you and probably get some advice from someone who's been through it for longer.
Right.
And so I
Yeah.
think yeah, I agree. I think this is a chance to get closer, to embrace this chance for more intimacy with someone instead of making it like a suffer off.
Right. And look, don't feel bad. Obviously, you're triggered. It's normal. I think a lot of people would be triggered by this in some way. But again, her options are either to talk to someone who's never gone through any infertility, and then she gets to be the number one sufferer, or she talks to you who's been through it, which I think she's going to get more out of that conversation by talking to you. And if you weren't triggered, you might be able to say, yeah, after 2 months, I did start to think about the what ifs or whatever, like relate,
Right.
you could
This has
relate to
helped
her.
me.
Right.
Right.
So, yeah, I would agree with that. I think, it's normal to feel this way, but I don't think this friend really did anything wrong, maybe just in her phrasing.
Agreed. All right. Let's do one more. I will read it.
All right.
I love the pod and I really admire both of you. I'm currently sitting in the hospital with my daughter and I'm feeling triggered by an email I just received from my father in law. For context, my 7-year-old child is dealing with serious illness. It came back in May following a 2-year remission. We're currently spending all day in the hospital so she can receive an infusion treatment. The whole ordeal is very scary and heartbreaking, but hopefully this treatment will put her back in remission. My in laws live in another state. We have an old sports car that is impractical for the city where we recently moved. And since my in laws like the car and have room for it, they're using it for 2 years until we move back to the suburbs. My father in law sent me the email below in the middle of my daughter's infusion, no mention of his granddaughter or well wishes of any kind. I know he knows about the treatment because I heard my husband tell him yesterday. In contrast, my parents have called her, sent a care package, and offered to fly out to help with my other 3 kids. Is this triggering or am I really just stressed about my child? Best, need a notary on the children's hospital. And then I'll read the email. So the email is addressed to her and the husband. And it says, here's how we can get a license plate for your car. 1, use the link below to get the state power of attorney form. 2, fill out the top part but do not sign it. 3, in box 2, appoint me as your temporary attorney. Use my name. 3, take the form to a notary and have your signature notarized. 4, forward the signed notarized form to me along with an insurance certificate for the car. A copy will not work. I would like to have these by Tuesday and of next week. That will allow me plenty of time to visit the county tag office and get plates. Love, Pa.
All right,
Okay.
Pa.
At least he said love at the
Yeah,
end.
he
So it's
did
not like
say love.
this is right.
He did say love, and Pa's cute. I'm sure Pa's super cute. Yeah, I think if this email came in addition to a text, how's she doing? What's happening? How's it
Right.
going? Like if this was just kind of, it sounded like he wanted to get this off of his plate. He put it in an email, he threw it out to her at the time of this happening. He maybe for him it was a convenient time to take care of this. The fact that it came without any acknowledgement or a text message or a phone call or any other thing about what was going on, I could see why this is triggering.
Right. Like at least at least before he gets into here's how we can get a license plate for your car. At least I hope daughter whatever her daughter's name is doing okay. I've been thinking about her. I know this might be a bad time. I think you could still send the email with a little bit more of like I wanted to get this out. Obviously, you guys are in the middle of something big, so please take your time.
The
We could do it by
timeline
Tuesday
is
of next week.
also
Yeah.
triggering. The fact that he put like
Yes.
the deadline while they're in the hospital, that part is triggering because it's kind of like, this is not my priority at all. And I will not be receiving deadlines from you about how to use this extra car in a time that's convenient for you. That part was
Yeah.
triggering too.
That's the worst part, I think, where he's like, I'd like to have these by Tuesday of next week. I would call this insensitive.
Yes. And look, there's a part of me that thinks like, okay, email's kind of like for business. So like I could see even just sending the email as like, here it is in your inbox. When you want to get to it, you have all the instructions and a call or a text about like the personal aspects of things in addition to this email, where it's almost like you send an email at midnight because you're thinking of something and you want to get it off your plate. You don't expect that person to deal with it at that time. You're just like, I'm passing this over to you to handle. But the fact that he put the deadline in there and didn't show any other, I'm pretty sure, shows of care, calling the daughter, calling them, texting to see how she's doing. And I think this is a bigger issue probably in feeling like my parents, as it sounds like her parents are doing so much to show like love and care and support through this really hard time. And her husband's parents aren't doing anything, which I think can just feel, the anger is the outward emotion, but I think probably the bigger, harder emotion is like sadness for the daughter, like feeling like they're not showing love or care for her. And I don't think your daughter probably knows. She's probably getting a lot of love from you. She's getting a lot of love from her other grandparents, but I could see there being like almost a sadness for the child of like, why don't these people care more about you? And that might make you
Right.
feel sad.
And I wonder if I mean, I got to excuse the behavior, but I do wonder if he knows the extent of like what it means actually,
Mm-hmm.
like what the seriousness of and maybe they don't live in a different state or they're not as close so they don't fully get it. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you want to
Imagine
give
that would
him
be
the
part
benefit
of
of the
it.
doubt, you can. And I think this might be a place where your daughter's still young. You have three other kids. Like, this might be a place where you or your husband, perhaps, maybe more so, would want to communicate like, this made us feel very unsupported, that you're kind of like pulling resources from us while this is happening rather than offering resources to us while this is happening. And it just made us feel really unsupported. And it did make me feel like there's sort of a lack of care for daughter. Um, and she can use all the love that she can get right now. I'm sure she's scared. These treatment, infusions don't sound fun. There's, invasive, kind of procedure that she has to go through, and they're probably all really scared. So I think this is bigger than just the email. I think there's probably like a larger level of lack of support and care for the child, where I know, like, even myself as a parent, if I feel like there's someone in my child's life, that I just don't feel like really cares for them, it makes me almost sad for them, especially if they were already suffering to begin with. Even though I know in my heart, like, the kid, they're fine, they get enough love, there is something that just feels like, sad that this person doesn't love them the way that they should be feeling loved right now. So,
Right.
yeah,
All
this
right.
is
Well, what
hard, but
would
it
you give
might
it then?
be. I mean, I'll say I'll give this a 6.
I was going
Um,
to say 6. I think that's a good one.
yeah, I'll give this a 6. I think this is a good spot for conversation. He might, like you said, be a little aloof. Maybe they're not aware of how serious this is. Maybe you haven't really fully explained, like, what could happen if this doesn't go into remission, or what it's like for her if, symptoms flare up, or um so I think this might just be, let this emotion inform you that there needs to be a little bit more, maybe, communication about what your expectations are from them as grandparents in this situation.
Agreed. All right. Well, let us know how that conversation goes.
Yeah.
We did it. Thank you guys for your emails. Don't forget, you can email us in oversharing@betches.com, or you can leave us a voicemail. Thank you guys for listening.
Yeah, I really love the emails. I thank you for being vulnerable. It helps us help you and other people. So really appreciate you. Keep writing in. No question too big or too small. We can handle it. All right, that's our time.
Great work today.